I will call the September 13th meeting of the Harnett County Board of Commissioners to order. It's good to see that we have some visitors today. Always welcome you attending and being a part of the proceedings. Although this is not there will be no public forum today. At this time, I'm going to ask Commissioner McCoy to lead us in the pledge and have the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us bow our heads, please. Dear Lord, we come before you this morning just giving thanks. Giving thanks that you have given us another day. You've given us with the average amount of our health. We ask you, Lord, to guide us. Lead us in the right direction as we make decisions for this county as well as for our citizens. Lord, we ask you to look on this world. Give us favor, Lord. There's so much going on that we don't know one day to another what's going to happen the next day. But we know that you are a provider and you are a Savior. So, Lord, I ask you to bless all the commissioners, bless our manager, and all the county employees, as well as the agencies here, and give us, like I said, the knowledge to make the right decisions for Harnett County. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McCoy. Any additions or deletions to today's agenda? If not, we will proceed. Mr. Roush?
Good morning. This first one is for the aging program. We do our budgets in the spring of the year. This is federal money that comes out in the fall of the year. It's for the in-home aid program and our nutritional site. We just got additional money in that program, so it's like a little over $10,000 for in-home aid and a little bit over $41,000 for the nutritional sites and Meals on Wheels.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Roush? Everyone in favor of moving forward with this funding? We'll put that on the consent agenda. All right.
The next one is this is some carry forward money in our COVID funds from last year, and what we want to do with this, we're going to replace the plexiglass partitions we have there in the health department. They're sliding glass doors and only go up about halfway. We're got a price to go in and replace those with opening on the bottom, and we're going to put bringing my WIC clients back into the building now to do face-to-face meetings or services, and we're going to had Kenneth and his staff to come in and price putting a dividing wall in my lobby in child health and WIC, so I can separate my WIC clients from my sick patients going into child health. So that's what I want to utilize that funding for. And it was a little bit over $1 million that we got for that.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, the consent of the board, we will move this to the consent agenda for Monday also. Yes.
The last one I've got, we didn't think this money was going to be carried forward, but they notified us about a week or so ago that we've got $115,000 in, they call this school liaison money, but this is for me to have a staff person that can work with the schools on COVID investigations, immunizations, those type things. Stuff that we do with Janet and her staff. I've had somebody for over a year that we utilize for that. So that's $115,000 for that.
Any questions or comments? All right, hearing none, we'll move that to the consent agenda for approval also. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Sykes, you squeaked in just in time.
Yes, sir.
Jay Sykes Development Services discussing the roads. This is a typical situation. That we're at, right?
Yes.
Yeah, good deal. Sorry about that. Better late than never. Yes, sir. As we've seen in the past, NCDOT is requesting that the county commissioners okay their request to have everything turned over to the state and into the system. I think we've had a good run here, about 2 or 3 months in a row. It's good to see that DOT is kind of moving along swiftly with their process as well. But it is everything is compliant on development services side with these roads, and would be certainly okay with the request.
And there's quite a number of these roads, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, if this is the seems to be the DOT process. Obviously, as development continues, we could be seeing more and more of these.
Anyone have questions about any of these streets or roads, moving them to DOT?
I do have just one question for my inquisitiveness, I guess. Are most of these roads or streets in developments that are going to be turned over to them, or are they just rural roads, or some of both?
So the majority of them are always going to be in fairly new developments. We have seen the last couple of years infield, like older developments.
Right.
And as those get built out, DOT will finally start taking it over, or they'll be on our list. I know several of you have received phone calls from your constituents that, hey, I'm still on a bad road, so we can say, okay, there's a few lots, left. So if Locklear Builders comes in and takes those down, then they can bring those roads up to standards and kind of a carrot and stick approach, if you will. So yes, sir. Majority of the ones are going to be new developments, and then there'll be. The good part about it is we do get some older ones still taken care of as well.
Good. Thank you, Jay.
I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are any of these roads private roads, or just new development?
No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. They're all new developments. Yeah, even if the ones that may be in an older development, they were still platted to be a public road. Okay. So none of these would be existing dirt or gravel roads.
Well, thank you for adding that. And the reason I asked that question because we have a number of roads that are private roads that are in terrible conditions.
Yes, ma'am.
They are always coming to the commissioners asking us to fix their roads. We know that we don't do that.
That's right.
So, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All right, hearing no objections or any other comments or questions, we'll move this to the consent agenda for approval on Monday. Thank you, Mr. Sykes.
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Locklear.
We're changing it up on you today. We're
Okay.
gonna keep it mixed up. Keep you off on your toes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We are getting close to the end of the road on the US 421 corridor study and EdMed overlay. We've been at this as far as a department since the first of the year, and we've gone through a pretty long process to get us to this point. We would have loved to have already kind of had this thing wrapped up, but our caseload kind of has made us continue to push this off until this month. So nevertheless, we're happy to be at the end of this and maybe put this issue to rest. Jay just passed out a handout that I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit today to kind of get us touch on some of the high points. You all have received a presentation that was given to you by our consultant, Chad Siri with Stewart. And so you should be very familiar with the ins and outs of the 421 overlay. and what got us here today. I do want to kind of bring us up to speed on what happened at the planning board and what we've heard recently. And I will, like I said, hit the highlights just for the rest of the audience and those that may be here today that want to hear about this, on what the 421, what it does. And basically, it's an overlay that's 600 feet on either side of 421 that basically runs from Lillingston's jurisdiction down to Irwin's jurisdiction. And as you can see on the small map that I have you, it's broken up into sub corridors. The first one being what we call the campus sub area, which obviously has more to do with the university as well as Central Carolina, because we have those two schools that lie in that area. So that area is called the campus sub area. And then it moves to a real small airport sub area because obviously we have the airport that sits along 421. And then the rest is just considered normal corridor area. And that takes us down to Irwin's jurisdiction. And so the reason behind it is we received a recommendation in our Harnett Growth land use plan in 2015 that said, hey, you've got all these imported items that are, or imported entities that are along US 421, and we should do something to preserve that area, make sure when it does grow, while we're not seeing a ton of growth now, but when it does grow, that it grows the right way. And so we get the A commercial store rather than the C commercial store, if that gives you an example. So this recommendation came out of our comprehensive growth plan. It encourages development along the corridor that will preserve existing landscape while providing attractive entrances or gateways into the county utilizing architectural standards. This is only applicable to commercial development. I know a lot of folks, worry about subdivisions and what it means to if they live on this corridor. This won't impact a person's residentially zoned land or someone wanting to use their property for residential purposes. It won't bother them at all. It's business as usual for those folks. And honestly, by state law, we can't require any architectural standards for residential houses. So even if we wanted to, we couldn't. So it's important that in case you get that call, that message gets received. And if there's any subdivisions that would happen there, we have subdivision standards in place that would allow what we feel like is an attractive enough standard that would take care of those too, if those were to happen along the corridor. The management of access will be a key factor for safety and appearance and overall functioning of this central artery. These will also promote safe traffic patterns through shared access, lateral access, and access management and parking. If you've had an opportunity to be out on Highway 87, I know Commissioner Nickel is out that way. If you go into one business, you don't have to usually, unless it's an old business that was before the standards, if you go into one business, you can use a lateral access to get to the next business. So that's just good planning practices. I go to places all the time where they don't do that. Matter of fact, I was in Fayetteville this past weekend and realized that I couldn't move from a gas station to a restaurant that was next door. I had to get back out, go down, do the turnaround, and come back and to go into the restaurant. So it makes a big difference as far as trying to ease traffic congestion and things like that. So this is one of the standards that we have in there, along with a whole host of other things as far as the way parking is designed and the way the buildings look and the way even gas stations look. Because like I said, Harnett County, we're no different than our neighbors to the north or anywhere else. We want the A product when it comes to town, and we want to be prepared as far as our regulations to make sure that we get that. So, and then last, we want to protect and preserve the rural landscape along the undeveloped and environmentally sensitive areas of the corridor through limited access and provisions for preserving woodlands and vegetative growth along these portions of the corridor. And this is just a reoccurring theme that we've had in all of our regulations throughout at least my time here, that we want to preserve environmentally sensitive areas, and so we took measures inside the regulations to help do that. So that's kind of the highlights of what you would see in the actual text amendment, I guess you could say. I want to walk you through real quick on our process to get us to where we're at today. Obviously, we took January to May of this year. We worked with the consultant, Stewart Engineering, to formulate and come up with what we feel like was what we were looking for. June 6th, we made the planning board presentation and update to the planning board to kind of get it on their radar, let them know what we were looking at. June 13th, if you'll remember, we had an update with you all. I think Chad came in and took you through the whole slideshow process and showed you kind of the ins and outs of what we had to do or what we were wanting to do. July 27th, we hosted an online virtual public meeting where we had about 20 to 30 folks show up on there. We think it was a success, but also what's important to know is we sent out 234 notifications to property owners who live or have property along that corridor. So they were made aware of what we were wanting to do in a handout, a flyer, which also gave them like a QR code where they could go online if they wanted to get into the weeds of it and really want to see it in detail. So they received a notification then, and then they also received a notification to show up and if they wanted to talk about it, and also if they wanted to just call our office and talk to somebody about it, that was also made available to them. At that time, September 6th, this month, the planning board meeting, we had a public meeting. There was another 234 notifications sent out to the folks along the corridor to let them know that that meeting was taking place. And we had some folks show up to that meeting and some of their concerns, we had 5 who spoke. I think we had around 10 total who came out. Their issues went from height really around the airport. We had one gentleman who owned a piece of property. His name is Carson Bethay. I'm sure he'll be here Monday night. Since that meeting, he's actually met with Jay and the county manager last Friday, and I think that they had a good meeting with him and extensively explained to him how the height regulations, not in these regulations or proposed regulations, but the current existing height regulations are what's going to be his governing factor. So in other words, his issues with height are already in place. These regulations aren't going to create any other issues as far as height regulations around the airport for him. So I think we'll see, but that we've spoke with him at length about these issues. Some of the other things I wanted to mention, one person mentioned that they really like the lighting regulations that we have in here for commercial businesses, but they encouraged us to use the dark sky standard. That is a standard that you see in some places. That's just a type of lighting standard that you see. We didn't have a problem with adding that as an encouragement for someone to use that, and so we'll certainly do that. One of the other issues, or more of a different issue where we actually changed the text from the planning board till today, was there was a regulation that said, like, if you have a small portion of your property that is in the overlay district, then all of your property was essentially in that. And it really helps us when there's it really helps to have that when there's a 1 or 2 acre tract, but it's really hard on a property owner when it's a 300 acre tract or a 100 acre tract, because that really tips them in to it. So we heard those concerns, and we changed it to where only the portions of the 600 feet that are inside of a person's property, those would be the only portions that would be affected by the regulation. So if you have, if a portion of your property falls into it and you want to construct a business inside of that, and it falls within the 600 feet, then you'll have to come into compliance with that. If you're just out of it, if you want to do something on the back side of your property that's away from the 600, then you wouldn't be required to come into these standards. So we heard that loud and clear, and we made those changes. That'll be before you tonight. The planning board voted. There was only 4 members there, so they voted 3-1 to pass it. Ms. Rose Ferguson, I think out of Commissioner Johnson's district, she voted against it, and I think it had more to do with Carson Bethay's, Mr. Bethay's issues and comments that he had made that he wasn't aware, or he needed more time to look at it. So like I said, I don't know if that changes anything, but I think I wanted to make it clear that we've met with him since then. So maybe that concern or her concern with that has been taken care of. Other than that, now we are fastly approaching Monday night, and hopefully we will answer everybody's concerns that were here today or here on the planning board. I know that staff has fielded, what would you say, about 5 or 10 calls?
Oh, yeah, they just,
Yeah.
more calls recently versus.
Yeah, it's typical when you start getting close to the final to the finish line. Folks start, hey, what is this thing I got in the mail? And so they start kind of asking questions about it. So we'll see what happens Monday night. But I feel comfortable that we've made everybody aware because we've sent out another 234 notifications letting folks know that Monday night we'll be doing this thing again. We'll be doing the public hearing for this, I should say. I know I also spoke with the general counsel from Campbell University, who was actually here today. I made him aware that I don't want to use the term exemption, but if your property has already an approved development plan, which Campbell University does, then these regulations, we would follow the development plan. We wouldn't follow these regulations. So that's important to know that, and the only two places that we have that in this county is the campus over here for the hospital and Campbell University. Several years ago, they put all their property in a development plan and got it approved through the county. So it didn't make a lot of sense for us to try to go on top of that when we've already got it approved through that process. So while I don't want to call it an exemption because that's not what it says in the ordinance, they are not included in these regulations because of that reasoning, in case you get that call. I'm available for any questions or comments, and
Development is not restricted to education or medical in this corridor, is it?
no, sir. No, the underlying zoning district still dictates what a person could do as far as land use is concerned on their property.
And the reason I asked the question, if a company was wanted to do light manufacturing,
Mm-hmm.
and part of their building or part of their property went into that 600-foot
Corridor area.
corridor, they would not, it wouldn't prevent them from doing what they want to do, is that correct?
No, they would fall
Okay.
under the existing regulations.
Okay.
I mean, don't get me wrong; it would affect them as far as they may have to do a good looking building or
Sure, yeah.
something a little bit different than a standard metal building, so to speak. But no, it's not going to stop them if the property's zoned correctly for that.
Any other questions for Mr. Locklear? All right. Hearing none, we will move to the next item.
Thank you.
We've got a couple of proposed zoning changes. Did you want to discuss those?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Jay Sykes back before you. This current rezoning is a request for 6.5 acres from RA 30 to commercial. It's located on NC 27 East and Bailey's Crossroads area. It's owned by Ms. Kimbrough, and the applicant is Reston Companies. If you're familiar with this area, it's generally a rural area. However, it's just outside of Johnston County and town of Benson, and then also just outside, pretty good ways away from Coates. In the area, there are several residential structures, agricultural land. There's a convenience store, which is actually in Benson's jurisdiction, has been for many years. Several churches and other neighborhood businesses. Currently, the site is vacant, and then per the application, the intent is to build a convenience and retail type store. Public water's in the area, but it's still septic would be utilized. Vehicle traffic along NC 27 is pretty heavy. About a year or so ago, it was 6,700 vehicles per day. Of course, there's an existing four-way stop there at Fairground Road, and then And then there's some realignment planned for Bailey's Crossroads Road. Excuse me, Red Hill Church Road is where the existing four-way stop sign is, as we've seen several throughout the county. Bailey's Crossroads and Fairground Road will be realigned. It's predominantly RA 30 in the whole area, in agricultural and rural residential. They're unlike many of the other crossroads in the county, 27 back the other direction heading west, or 421 heading west. This crossroads does not have a current development node. Again, as a lot of ours do. The Mamers one is one that we've seen frequently. So the land use is not compliant with the rezoning. However, staff did recommend an approval, and then also looking at the neighborhood businesses, the traffic patterns, the potential or the upcoming, I'll say upcoming, I talked to NCDOT and that'll is projected to start this fall, the upcoming realignment of the roads. Staff did recommend approval based off of these factors. And then we would recommend a central development node in the future for a land use map amendment when we get into that process. We did go back and forth, again, looking at the evaluation and our considerations. After talking with DOT, Way Bailey's Crossroads will end up being cul-de-sac, and that will not be a crossroads anymore. And with the development patterns, Benson, as well as the area businesses, that was staff's thoughts. Planning board did not recommend approval. They voted 4-0 to deny, based off of staff concerns as well as going through the small scale rezoning criteria. Citizen concerns earlier. Many residents attended the meeting. Several spoke in oppositions. Concerns included vehicle safety and visibility. NCDOT improvements may help some of the issues, but their citizens were concerned that the business may recreate those issues. The citizens didn't feel there was another need for a business in the area, as the existing businesses serves their needs, or commuting into Dunn or Coates, they seemed to be okay with. They were worried about excess lighting in the rural community, increased crime, public safety, and communication, again, because of multiple jurisdictions. But again, staff went back and forth. We talked with DOT. We looked at the realignment in the area. Again, the way Benson grows and just the corridor of being an NC route, that was our basis for recommending of approval. Staff is available for any questions.
I know we can't ask what they're gonna build, but it sure sounds like a Dollar General.
It's trending. It's trending that way.
Did you see how I operated that? I didn't even have to say it.
Felt like that was, you could feel the Dollar General thing. I wanted to add real quick before we turn it over to questions. Exactly what Jay said. We really struggled with supporting this, but what kind of tipped us over the edge to kind of throw support to it was two reasons. Like Jay said, NCDOT is realigning this intersection. And Bailey's Crossroads, we hadn't spent a lot of time. I know we didn't spend a lot of time because we hadn't had a ton of growth up that way, as far as going through the land use plan process and all that good stuff. And we didn't have a development node there. And typically we would have a development node on a crossroads like that. So we believe that, and of course, this may say something different, and when we go through the planning process, the land use process, in the coming year or two, that certainly could change. But we believe that was probably not a bad idea for us to have a rural development node there for some type of mixed commercial use to take place, because that's just typical in these for locations for Dollar Generals or whatever the case may be, convenience stores or what have you. The other thing that I wanted to mention is this thing is really close to the town of Benson. So we didn't even realize that it was, what was it, 1.5 miles or 2 miles? Yeah, it's really close to the municipal growth area for that. And we're not used to thinking about the town of Benson because obviously they're not in Harnett County, it's in Johnston County. So when we kind of put that together, we kind of came up with, well, maybe we can support this, because I think when we go through the land use process, it's going to tell us that we should probably do something, some type of mix change here. Now, having said all that, there's that other thing that happens, and the reason why we have public hearings. It's the folks who live in the community who show up and say, hey, look, man, we don't want this here, or we don't like to have these things here. That's not, we could care less and all that. So those are the things that we can't consider beforehand, but we can certainly, and it's up to you all to consider when those things happen, when we go through the public hearing process. Let me say it that way. So just understand that this thing could go both ways. I just wanted you to understand where we were coming from a department standpoint. It's really hard sometimes when they're like this, when they're close to a town, to have all the ingredients that's telling you one thing, but like I said, there's that outstanding situation where you have the actual folks in the community that's saying otherwise. And they brought up really good reasoning for everything that they said, and they conducted themselves really well through the process, or the planning process at the planning board, I should say. So I just wanted to make you all aware of kind of where we stood on that, and we'll field any questions. I'm sorry I took over today.
Any questions about this proposed development or zoning change?
Mr. Chairman, I have more of a comment. I had a complaint called home by my Hodges man that lives close by there, who was opposed to this, very opposed to this, and I know it's difficult to maneuver and negotiate intersection anyway. So a lot of the complaint was traffic activity, and they just don't want it down there.
Jay, there's going to be a small-scale rezoning issue here.
Yes, sir, it would be.
Could you walk commissioners through that part of it?
Yes, sir. Good point, Mr. Snow. So this is one that we haven't probably seen it lately, where the rezoning to commercial in the middle of agricultural rural residential would be spot zoning was the term we used to use, small scales rezoning. If we did not include, I think at the bottom of the staff report, it's 4 different extra criteria that you could consider. You'd have to go through size of the tract, overall size of the tract of the land proposed for rezoning is reasonable when compared to the size of the zoning districts. So zoning district of RA 30, that's minimum lot size for commercial. This is at what, 6.5 acres. So that's reasonably sized for a commercial entity that would have to be on septic. Compatibility with the comprehensive plan, not necessarily compatible. It could be, like Mark said, if you looked at all the surrounding neighborhood businesses. Impact to the adjacent property owners and the surrounding community, and the benefits, of course, this is always the one that Mark said, takes into the factors that we, just the personal and social aspect of it, the ones that we don't look at from a standard compatibility issues. Rezoning outweigh potential inconvenience or harm to the community. And then the comparison of uses, outlined uses within the proposed district are similar to compatible permitted zoning uses. That's something that we also looked at initially, whereas could something like this be approved via a special use permit? Special use permits in RA 30 do allow for types of convenience stores, but that maxes them out usually at 5,000 square feet or so. Other type businesses, churches would be allowed, landscaping and stuff like that, daycare, stuff like that are still allowed within the zoning district via the SUP. So those are things to look at, as Mr. Snow stated, when outside of the standard land use classification that kind of would already have a classification where it would be more compatible. Going back to that overlay, if it had the overlay, it gives y'all an extra tool in your toolbox to use to make it more compatible, if you will. Whereas this right now does not have that tool available. Does that make sense? Thanks, Dwight, for mentioning that. I appreciate that.
Any other questions concerning this proposal? You said it is compatible with the land use plan?
It is not, no, sir.
It's not.
It's not, yeah. We could see it, even if, I think our thoughts were we would still evaluate this area, that maybe not this crossroads, but a crossroads in the upcoming plan
Yeah.
update.
The way that the regulations work from the state to us now, some of the changes that have gone through. So if you decide to approve this and it's not in cooperation with the land use plan, basically we would go and change the land use plan also with the same motion that saying, hey, look, we know it's not. In fact, the land use plan is not telling us to do this now, but we see a reasonable reason, I should say, that we would change the land use plan. So if you all decided to make the change to commercial, then we would change the land use plan as well. Currently, we're required to do that to show that that's the way this area is headed for. So it's kind of a by law. It's kind of a 2-for-1 type scenario that we're required to do to actually change the land use plan also, if you decide to kind of go against what the land use plan is telling you to do.
Ask the question.
And again, it's kind of outdated, so.
Yeah.
In making that decision, you still will go, take under consideration the will of the citizens.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I said what I said. If you all felt after you hear the citizens' concerns Monday night that absolutely this doesn't make sense. I mean, I heard what you said, Mark, and the gang, but that I also heard what the citizens said for that area, and that makes more sense to me. That we'll absolutely just keep it the same, and you just deny it and move on, which is what the planning board done. So, listen,
I'm glad to hear that, simply because I think the will of the citizens should be the first to consider.
that's
And
certainly
another
within.
thing, all these
Right.
comments about dollar stores, the way the economy is now, dollar stores are needed in areas like that. So I just want us to get away from this one about dollar stores. If it's needed, it's needed in certain areas. I'm not talking about you, whatever. Some of the comments I hear about dollar stores. Some people take dollar stores as a way of providing a need for their families. So I just don't like hearing these comments about dollar stores. I'm being very honest about it. Everybody can't afford to go to all these big, fancy, high-priced stores. So that's just my comment.
We received several complaints recently about the attractiveness of the Dollar Generals in the county, and because they really haven't done a good job at maintaining their landscaping like they should have. And so Randy Baker, who's our zoning officer in our office, and this is just information for the board, has been working with Dollar General. We've been issuing fines. We've got their attention finally, and we've been working with their person who does all their landscaping to try to, number one, make sure they maintain it properly and keep the stuff alive. They spend, I don't know how many thousands of dollars to put in landscaping, they just let it die. I think the one on 27 right now, they're going to take and pull everything up and put it all back in. And so we're trying to make a more effort from a staff standpoint to try to keep them to try to keep it up to at least a minimum degree. And so just FYI as far as that's concerned.
I really do appreciate that, and appreciate you making it public too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark, you mentioned that DOT is going to realign Bailey's Crossroads Road and Fairground Road, is that?
Yeah, that's
Fairground
actually.
Road on both sides of 27?
Yeah, Jay may have more information as far as the specifics of that, but yeah, absolutely. We're going through this process. We were not even made aware of it from DOT that there was going to be an alignment for that actual crossroads, which kind of led to it being more amenable for commercial growth. Which, like I said, I pointed that out earlier.
And, I know this is a very dangerous intersection.
Yes, and we heard that.
It's, you take your life in your own hand.
Yes.
When you're, if you're on Fairground Road and you want to turn right to go towards Coates, you can usually, that's okay. But if you want to turn left or if you want to go straight across, that's a danger zone.
Yes.
Uh,
And that's, and I
to
think
put
that's
a,
what
and
we
to put a
heard.
building.
That's right, yeah, yeah, there's a bit of a hill, there's
Yeah.
crossroads, then Bailey's Crossroads and Fairgrounds more of a, it's not very perpendicular, which I think is what
You're
part
right.
there is to square that up.
And then if you stick a building on that corner,
And add more traffic to it.
well, it's not a matter of adding more traffic to it, but I'm concerned about the ability to see
Site
what,
distances.
yeah, sight distance on that track.
Well, the building would be set back, but to any extent, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I understand. And like I
Look, they're
said,
gonna have the parking lot in front. If they set the building back, they'll have the parking lot in front. Look, there's a lot of farmers out there. Farmers drive pickup trucks.
that's right. Could be a big old 250 sitting in there.
But yeah, you bring a 250 or something like that in there, and you're sitting in a mid-sized car, guess what you're looking at? You're looking at the tires on that truck if you're not careful. I mean, it's hard to, and invariably they will park, and, you know, I'm not blaming the farmers. We need farmers. But they park where it's convenient for them, and they don't think about who's gonna be trying to use that road and see. And it's not just the farmers, there's a lot of people like that.
Well, those are all legitimate concerns. So that's why I wanted to make it crystal clear from a board's perspective that, you know, whatever the board, you know, whatever you, once you hear all the things, you make your best decision. But understand as a department, there's good reasoning on both sides, is what I'm saying. So if you get in, you know, Monday night, you know, do what you need to do.
Any other questions or comments?
It's the best way to put it. We can't put
We're
it no
okay.
better.
Let me say this too.
Yeah, I'd like to say I live near that intersection. To negotiate that intersection in heavy traffic is pretty tough.
Yes.
Did add another business across the street.
I'm glad they will be here.
More cars, more in and out traffic, it's gonna make it worse, I would think.
Yeah, well, hopefully
Even if
the
they
changes DOT is going to make is actually going to maybe help some of the,
They're gonna have to do
alleviate
them.
some of those concerns, but we'll
Has
see.
DOT give you a time frame on the realignment?
You know what, we didn't get a time frame on this.
Imagine that.
Yes, sir, and I did echo your thoughts of like, hey, we want an update on everything they had going on. The four-way stop signs that are supposed to be turned into traffic circles, et cetera, or just a heads up on something like this. It's supposed to be let, towards the end of the summer, and could be, construction on this could be fall. So, and that's just on this realignment, the four-way stop sign turned into a traffic circle, we're not sure. But at least Crossroads is supposed to be cul-de-sac, and then they would square up, Fairground, to more of a 90-degree T
So
intersection.
sooner rather than later.
Sooner rather than later on this
Sooner
one.
rather than typical.
Everything else, we're trying to get either DOT come in and talk to everyone, or give us a list of stuff we got going on. We got lots of, four-way stop signs in odd areas.
Like, did they like? Is that all they did during COVID was print stop signs? Yeah, because I mean, it seems like they're popping up everywhere. Like,
Yeah, and,
They're a precursor to traffic
And-
circles.
some of the citizens don't know how to, sum up the four-way stop signs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people
That's a
across-
major problem too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we can't do nothing about that.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. We can't.
All right,
Anything else? We're gonna bring up Sarah. Sarah's currently a planner one in our office, and she's you're gonna start seeing Sarah more, is what I'm saying. So we're kind of easing her into the process, so she's gonna handle our next rezoning for us.
Hi there. Good morning,
Good morning.
Commissioners. As Mark said, I'm Sarah Arbor. I am the Planner 1 here with the Harnett County Development Services. Here to discuss a requested rezoning from commercial to a residential zoning designation, the RA20R. The property is approximately 4.5 acre piece. It is in the Nature's Crossroads subdivision located at the intersection of Redbird Drive and NC 24. It's out in Broadway. Johnsonville, excuse me. I'm so sorry. A little bit of background about this property. It had been evaluated several times for a change of zoning from a residential zoning designation to commercial before ultimately being rezoned to commercial in 2016. Surrounding land uses of the property are primarily single-family residential with a few non-residential uses, um, including vacant commercial structures and churches. If you take a look at the zoning map there, you can see that the property, although there is a little bit of commercial sort of across in C24, it is predominantly a residentially zoned area with RA20R and RA30, or excuse me, RA20M surrounding. The underlying land use classification is agricultural with low density residential designation across in C24, which is compatible with a zoning change to RA20R. At the September 6th Planning Board, the Planning Board voted unanimously 4-0 to recommend approval of the zoning change, and no citizens were there to speak in opposition. And staff is open to any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Sarah? This rezoning?
It's down there in my area, so, I mean, I'm actually very familiar with that property and that road there, so everything pretty much like trailers, right? They're like double wides or single wides and double wides that are lined up there down Redbird. Yeah, I don't see anything really being put there because that's kind of around like a little curve too, which would be extremely dangerous in the future for anything else.
Yeah, I would add to that. When this initially, I remember when this thing was zoned commercial, it was slightly controversial because we did not support it because a couple of these lots are actually inside of an existing subdivision as there. So there were some people in opposition, but eventually the board at the time, they moved to approve it and make it commercial. For the person that was asking for that, we felt like it should have stayed residential because that just made more sense. And so it looks like Tom has come back and made that the case. So he's looking to move it back to residential. I think it's more typical to be used that way than it would be commercial.
Anything else? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Blevins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm here to talk about a memorandum of understanding between the city of Fayetteville and Harnett County, if you so choose to do that. So let me give you a little bit of background. What this is about was approximately a year and a half to 2 years ago, Fayetteville became eligible to apply for $5307 directly to FTA. Generally, before they had gone through DOT to get those funds for their bus system. Excuse me. So, like I said, about 2 years ago, they applied and started receiving it. And once they started receiving it, because they are a member of FAMPO, this is a metropolitan area, they were required to look around at the urban areas, which happen to touch Hoke County and Harnett County along 87, and decide whether or not to split those dollars. So this is the beginning of that attempt to split dollars from the FTA funds. So Fayetteville would be a recipient, and Harnett County would be a sub-recipient of $5307. The thing about this is that in order for us to receive it, we would have to provide transportation into Fayetteville. It doesn't have to be a fixed route. It just has to be a route that it has to be a trip that we take that we don't receive any other funds for, such as possibly dial-a-ride. And we're trying to figure that out as we're moving forward if the board decides to sign off on the MOU. They've already got their agreements not in place, but drafted up to see if we want to receive the funds. And initially, the funds will be ARPA dollars, which is zero amount match. So it really doesn't have any effect to us except for we develop a plan to take trips to Fayetteville, either more or less, depending on. So we don't usually go to Fayetteville unless we have medical appointments or somebody needs to go see the Social Security office. We don't have any like recreation trips, like pick people up and say, well, okay, we'll take you to the mall, drop you off. I mean, those are something we consider doing if the board decides it wants to go that route. So generally, it's just an MOU. We don't have to take the funds, and every year, all we have to, if the board approves it, all we have to do is every year decide whether or not we're going to try to do a project or not. And again, the $5,307 can pay for maintenance of vehicles. It can pay for, again, maintenance of vehicles that are used to go to Fayetteville. Can be used for administration, or excuse me, operations, not administration. It's a little complicated. It's the first time we've done it. Campo doesn't split those monies up. They split it up with the city of Raleigh. Campo gets, or city of Raleigh gets most of those funds that they get up there. Town of Cary gets them, and generally that's it, Wake County. And so I even looked in to see, well, was this something in the future that we could be doing with Campo? And it would be a long range goal in order to get those funds, because like I said, they were already doing that. And again, really the crux of this is that we provide transportation into the urban area in return. A little background, Hope County tried it a few years ago, and they've been receiving funds, and their funds have increased. And if anybody's familiar with Hope County, it's the Rayford Road out of Fayetteville, 401. They did a fixed route from Rayford to there, and their ridership was very small. So they've stopped that, and going back to the sort of what we're thinking of is that just keeping up with trips to go into Fayetteville, then we get reimbursed for it, because it's based on reimbursement. It's not an automatic give us dollars. Is there any questions I can try to help you with?
You said this is ARPA funds
The
initially?
first group is ARPA dollars.
What happens after the ARPA dollars?
Then what we have to do, if you sign off on the MOU, then what we have to do is every year tell the city of Fayetteville whether or not we would like to do a project to receive $5,307.
If they're not ARPA funds, are there any matching requirements?
Not for ARPA.
No, I say.
I'm sorry.
Once we
Yes.
get past the ARPA funds,
Right.
would there be matching requirements?
There is. So it's 5307 pays for 80% for maintenance. I take that back. I'm sorry. 80% for operations expenses. So we'd have to match for 20%. Or if you were doing it for maintenance of vehicles, then it was 50-50.
Looks to me after the first year, we're gonna be on the hook for a bunch of dollars.
That's, I want you to tell me, what advantage is that to us?
Yeah. How many trips to Fayetteville do we?
We are not doing a lot of trips to Fayetteville. Mostly medical, and that's usually NEMT. If we get reimbursed by Medicaid, there's not many trips that we take, Dial-A-Ride or any of those other ones that goes into Fayetteville.
So even if you did like a direct route, the pain really wouldn't be worth the pleasure in the long run at all. I mean, 70.
The only thing you could do is hope to get you still have to pay 20% to go to Fayetteville for an empty bus. Or an empty.
Fayetteville's a long ride from where I live down on the western side, let alone from up here.
You bet it is. You bet it is. And honestly, they've asked us several years in a row, but the ARPA money came up. And the reason why we didn't buy it is for the same reason. We don't have the ridership that goes down there. So we didn't really, we didn't explore it too much. And as they were setting it up. So this is actually the first time they put it together to do the MOU for the three counties. Now Cumberland should do it because they're right there doing it. And Hoke's already in bed with them, pardon the pun. They're already in bed with them doing it. So, and we were just a new player on the team. So.
I didn't answer my question. Is what advantage is it to us? Do you see it as an advantage?
I don't see any advantage to the system right now as it stands.
Okay, then why should we even think about it? Because ARPA money is not going to be here forever. I mean, they're turning down stuff now from the federal government on the ARPA and other programs for the COVID virus and all of that. So I don't see us being in a position to take on something that is going to add more funding for us. Now, let me ask one more question. Will that limit your ability for our citizens to meet their doctor's appointments or whatever in Cumberland County?
In the future, there's a possibility. But again, I'm not trying to advocate for the MOU. I'm leaving it up to you all to make that decision. If
I
you do
know
that,
that, but I'm just saying
I,
that
I,
we need to know that it's an advantage for us instead of us end up having to put out more funds for something in a year from now.
right. Now, we do get calls, requests to go to Fayetteville, but we don't always be are able to make them because of other medical treatments or we're filled up for those things. So we do get those calls. I'm not telling you it's a lot of calls, though.
But we get reimbursed from Medicaid or Medicare when we
Medicaid.
do a medical trip, right?
We do, and we also get paid different ways. You know, the next program I'm going to talk about, the rope, we get paid for that. We also have Division of Aging pays us for if they're headed that way for those medical treatments. So there is ways to get paid.
Okay, so that you're telling me that if we vote against this, it would not stop those patients that we have here
That is correct.
from using the service to go to Cumberland County.
That is correct.
Okay,
We're being asked to
now you
approve-
asked my question.
Yeah, we're being asked to approve something that's actually got no benefit to the county.
That's exactly, I mean, I don't know, I just got one vote here.
Well, the only
May I
benefit would
ask a
be,
question?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
The only benefit would be is if we could provide a new service that currently isn't available that goes to Fayetteville. So if we determined that there was something that the citizens of Harnett County would utilize that we don't currently provide, like a medical, so if they wanted to go to the mall or other types of trips, we could offer those and do it as a dial-a-ride. I need to go to Fayetteville to go to court there or something like that. We could then pay for that with these funds. If we determined that it wasn't beneficial, we could opt out and not do it once it came time to doing the match.
That's correct.
So what we really need to decide is there a demand for something other than what we're currently providing and getting a reimbursement for? And that's something that I guess we would just have to provide. Barry could provide that there was a demand
How many calls
for
a
something
year do you
else.
get for something other than medical?
Offhand, maybe 100 to 200, honestly. I mean, for a whole year. I think the manager just said it the right way is for us maybe just to approach FAMPO for some study money to decide whether or not it's really worth the trip. I mean, honestly, but the MOU, the only thing it would do is it would set us up so that we didn't have to go back to Fayetteville, we'd have to come back to the board, because we can turn projects down every year and just say we don't want the money, and they just keep it.
Mr. Blevins, how often would this MOU be an annual basis?
Steps like this.
In other words, if we were to enter into this MOU, how long can we do that on a yearly basis?
You know, I don't remember. I think it's just, I want to say in a perpetuity, but I don't remember seeing the term on it.
But
We can opt to
I
not.
appreciate Manager Trout's comments, and the point in me asking that question is, if this was renewable on an annual basis, then certainly the first year when ARPA funds are available and there would be no match, if we saw our citizens, it did benefit our citizens and it was something that they were utilizing, then we might want to continue that. But I would be hesitant to enter into an MOU that would bind us into perpetuity and not have us with a way to get out of that if it's not benefiting our citizens, and then we're on the hook, if you will, for that matching money. That's where I'm coming from.
Right,
with that.
and I'm re-looking at it now. There is an option for the county to not participate
Yeah,
and
if you
pull
look at-
out.
If you look in the information, 6.2,
Mm-hmm.
it says if a subrecipient opts not to participate in this memorandum, the subrecipient shall notify FAMPO and the city of Fayetteville in writing of the decision.
So we would have an option to participate for a year in which the ARPA funding would be available. we would have no matching expense. We could gauge the participation of our citizens and make a decision at the end of that year as to whether or not that would be something we would want to continue if it was benefiting our citizens for whatever the match would be, or that we really did not need to continue.
Correct. That is correct, yes.
I think he said we can opt out if we can opt out of. Well, then that you answer my questions.
I think it would be, if we decide to go this first year on a trial basis, I think it would be very advantageous to keep a log and report to us
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
before the next year of, I had this many calls for a shopping trip, or this many calls to go to the water park, or, you know, whatever. And that way we can see what the requests are for.
Yep. We could definitely do that.
Is this reasonable?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's the consensus of the board? Do we want to give this a one-year trial basis since there's no obligation of funding from the county?
I think it's reasonable since we'll provide extra benefits for the citizens. And then if it after the year, you know, we have the right to opt out of it. I agree with that.
Okay. We will leave this on the consent agenda and give it a one-year trial.
Fair enough. We'll make that happen then.
All right.
As requested.
Thanks, sir.
All right. So the next item is the FY or FY23 Rural Operating Assistance Program. So we just now got that information from them, how much they were actually going to distribute. As you recall, ROPE is a funds from the state, particularly in the programs, the Elderly and Disabled Assistance Program, Employment and Transportation Assistance Program, and the Rural General Public Program. EdTap is mandatory through the General Assembly. The other dollars that are left out are additions that they approve every year. And it can go back and forth. If you recall, you may recall in FY20, I think it was, they didn't fund us at all, which was the first time since they started. So the totals right now are $251,462. Of that, $89,368 is for EdTap. That's the Elderly Disabled Assistance Program, which is probably our most favorite program. Employment Transportation Assistance Program, which is at $28,847. The Rural General Public Program is $133,247. So let me back up a little bit. The Elderly and Disabled, that is one we use to transport, obviously elderly 60 years plus, or disabled riders, either for anything, they go medical, go to a job, or any of those other things, they're automatically eligible. They do have to apply in order for us to keep track of who's applied for it. Employment and Transportation Assistance, that's generally geared around DSS, their workforce program for transportation to work, also for workforce development. We have reached out to both those organizations to find out if they have any estimates. What we can do, if we don't have a need for it, we can actually move that into the EdTap program, just switch it over. And then we have the RGP, which is the General Public Program, which is the dollar ride, commonly known as the dollar ride. That's the only one that requires a match, but we don't pay a match. We use our dollar ride fares for the match for the program. All of them are good programs. All of them we've used for years, and I'll leave it up to you all if you have any questions. Or in this particular case, the board approves, but the manager and the finance director signs the application.
Any comments or questions? Consensus of the board to approve this, or? Okay, we will move that to the consent agenda for Monday night. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Smith, you want to talk about the Homeland Security Grant Program?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm coming before you today to ask for permission to accept $66,000 in Homeland Security Grant Program funding. Our emergency management staff put together a grant for the Sheriff's Department to be able to purchase a tactical robot for Sheriff's Office operations. This will be utilized for special response team tactical operations, and will also support my department in hazmat or hazmat material operations and responses. The robot will be equipped with a camera system and an articulating arm, which it can move objects, pick objects up. And this will also be a mutual aid source where we can actually deploy this to other counties as it's needed, as long as we're not using the resource at the time. And there are no shared costs in this. This is a strictly reimbursable grant from the federal government. No cost to the county. Any questions?
Any questions about that? Any objections to approving, accepting this grant? All right, very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. All right, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. On August 9th, we met and discussed the Wake County Water District just west of Fuquay, which consists of about 500 customers. The county supplied water this year for over 25 years. And when I came to you at that time, that was about seeking the board's input on future development in that area, given the fact that the town of Fuquay would like to purchase that infrastructure and serve those customers in the near future. And we have existing agreements that address that. So at that time, we agreed, or the board agreed, to allow a 75 lot development, but my charge was to go back and see where Fuquay was as far as a time frame when they would like to purchase the district, given their involvement with the city of Sanford and getting future water from them. So I reached out to Fuquay. They responded to me that very same week and told me they didn't give a lot of specifics or nail any specific date down, but they did try to say that, you know, they had contacted an engineering firm to look at the study of how they could supply the district with water. That was underway, and they thought no later than basically 4 years from now. So fourth quarter 2026, that's when their deal with Sanford is scheduled, the construction schedule to be complete. And they think that they will have made all the necessary steps to acquire the water district and supply water to those customers at that time. So we're basically talking about 4 years at the latest.
Will they continue to buy some water from us in 2026?
Oh, they'll always buy water from
Okay.
us. Yeah, they own 2 million gallons in our water treatment plant, and they own 5 million gallons in our 36-inch line that goes up to Fuquay on 401. So they'll continue to buy water from us. And they've got a 10-year contract with us that the board approved about 6 months ago, where we can give them up to an additional 2 million. Now that's just for 10 years, and they pay a higher rate for that. But that's currently where that stands. But they'll continue to get water from us. Sanford was to try to, the deal with Sanford was to meet their needs way down the road, 40 plus years from now.
Any questions, board, about this?
I do appreciate you researching it and reaching out to them, though. Thank you.
Okay, so it's still is it the board's concurrence that we limit development in that area or do it on a case-by-case basis? I don't think that we'll receive a lot more, well, I shouldn't say that. You know, individual requests are one thing where somebody wants water. The town of Fuquay has to approve that first, the way the agreement's written, and then it comes back to us. And if somebody wants to tap onto a water line, we certainly don't deny them that. But I would like the board's, discretion, or give that discretion back to us to look at those future developments, because, we've got our citizens here to be concerned about with all the rapid growth in that area. And so if we're not going to supply them in the future, that could create a strain on us going forward for the next 4 years.
What's the pleasure of the board?
And I'm assuming the strain would be on upkeep and whatever of the system, and not so much a water strain for us.
Again, depending on what they came back with, we're limited as to what we can supply them anyway based on the infrastructure in the ground.
Right.
So I would think that a lot of it would be 100-lot developments. If they want to come back, just like the 75 lots, if they want to come back and do 100-lot developments, is that something we want to discourage and basically leave it up to single tap request or something like that? And we've sort of been looking at it through those glasses anyway. Going forward, that's why I came to the board a couple of weeks ago. That request was from a developer who wanted immediate consideration, and so that's why I came to the board. But anyway.
I think we should continue to look at this on a case-by-case basis, as opposed to making a blanket approval. What's the thoughts of the board?
Were we to continue on that vein, Mr. Ward, does that put any added work on you and your staff?
Not really. We're putting automated meters in that area, so it's not like we're running trucks. Now, if there's a water line break, yes, we have to go deal with it. But somebody's not in that area all the time with automated meters. I don't have meter reading trucks up there. There's no sewer, so I don't have that staff up there. So it's not particularly burdensome that way. So the strain, if any strain was there, would be just the rapid growth that's happening in the northern part of the county and continuing to serve that with water if they continue to grow exponentially in that area. But I really don't see that happening, because even with that development, it takes a couple of years to get the subdivision up and built and using that water. So they've given us sort of a 4-year timeline. I think if something happens and this falls through with Sanford and the town, then maybe we just need to readdress and get the board's approval or opinion about what goes forward from that time.
And we've been doing a case-by-case basis already, right?
Correct.
So is it the agreement of the board to just continue on the way we've been going?
I'm good with that.
Okay, all right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Ms. Bauer.
Hi, good morning. I'm here this morning to request for the board to approve our county manager's office to accept a little over $110,000 from the North Carolina Arts Council for the fiscal year 2023 Grassroots Arts Program Grant. So again, this year, our county manager's office was designated the provisional partner so that the county would get funding to go back into the community to support arts organizations and arts programming. This year's grant has been a little bit different, and we actually tripled the amount of funding that we are going to be receiving. The way they've set up this year's grant is it's actually 2 pots of money. So we are getting a little over $46,000 from state funding that will require a match for any of the organizations that are subgranted, as well as a pot of ARPA funding that does not require a match. So with that all together, there is $110,553, and each of those grants are requiring that a multicultural requirement be met. This allows us to work with arts organizations to make sure that all populations in the county are being able to get arts programming, excuse me. The difference in the two grants and two pots of money is the state funding is specifically being used to support arts organizations and arts programming, whereas the ARPA funds are being used for capacity building, sustainability, and working to improve outreach. So simple things as hiring a coordinator for an organization to expand arts programming and different capacity building things like that. So the majority of this grant the county is not accepting. We are actually just serving as the pass-through. So we set up a panel with different members of the community to review all the applications, and the goal is to sub-grant a majority of the money out into the community.
How much of this, or does all of this pass through to the municipalities? Or do we retain some of it?
We're retaining, or the recommendation this year is for us to retain about $25,000 of that, and that's going to be used to, that will be $25,000 of the $46,000 that can be used for arts programming. About $14,000 is being allocated for the school system to do an arts and education program where there'll be performances at the middle school and elementary schools. A little over $8,000 to go to the public library, and then $1,500 to go to our parks and recreation. Both the library and parks and recreation would be doing art programming for an after-school program and adults with that. The rest of the funding is being looked to be sub-granted out.
Is this different than what the municipalities have gotten in the past, where they put on concerts in the park or different things? I know Andrew was doing, they would have about 3 or 4 concerts in the park, and they were using Arts Council funding.
They were, and this year we actually did not have any of the municipalities apply.
Okay.
So that would be one way for the funds to be used, and it has been used in the past along with the Chambers of Commerce, but we did not receive any applications this year.
So is it the pleasure of the board to accept this money, this funding? All right, we will put that in the consent agenda for approval on Monday then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Appel, you want to talk about the animal services ordinance?
Yes, good morning. So after the public input session, I appreciate all the comments that came through, reviewed everything, had some more internal discussions. So some additional changes have been made to the ordinance since that meeting. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to incorporate everything that has been suggested, and I can explain some of the reasons for that, but I'll just go through the changes that have been made. So, starting on page 4, which is under the definition section, adequate shelter. So based on some comments, provided some additional clarification down there kind of towards the bottom where they say that this, and talk about the structure, says all animals in the environment area shall be free of accumulated waste, and then have added excrement and other toxic or hazardous materials. And that's just to be clear, that has to be a clean, appropriate shelter. So added that to it. So moving on to the next change on page 11, and this is under animal control offenses, subsection 4B. So I did add a new one on here, a new violation, which states it shall be unlawful for any person to entice or lure any animal out of an enclosure or off the property of its owner or person in possession, or to seize any animal while the animal is held or controlled by its owner or person in possession, or while the animal is on the property of its owner or person in possession. So again, this is to, discourage theft of property, trespassing, so on. So just a reminder that that is against the law. Moving down on that same page under public nuisances. So I had some comments and I know from Commissioner Matthews regarding this first section regarding the habitually, repeatedly, without provocation, chase, snaps, attacks, or otherwise molest pedestrians. So what I've done, first of all, is I've split it out into 2 subsections. Originally, I had it all under number 1, so I split it out. So number 1 is snaps, attacks, or otherwise molest pedestrians, bicyclists, motor vehicles, livestock, domestic animals, while off the owner's or person possessions property. So that's subsection 1. Subsection 2 is similar, but this is when the animal's on the property. So habitually or repeatedly, without provocation, chases, snaps at, attacks, or otherwise molest persons lawfully entering lawfully entering the owner's or person possessions property. And I've added examples, so including but not limited to delivery drivers, contractors, government officials, and the performance of their legal duties, licensees, guests, and invitees. And even if the animal never leaves the property, except that this provision shall not apply if such animals is restrained by a leash, tether, pen, fence, or other secure enclosure. I've also added for clarification purposes that for the purpose of this section, an underground electric or invisible fence shall only be considered secure if in fact it contains the animal and a sign or other notifications present to alert others that the animal is restrained. So, based on the feedback, I've added examples of what lawful a person that's lawfully entering the property, and also clarified that a electric fence is secure so long as the animal adheres to it. Next section, moving on to page 14. Under number 8, added just a little bit under teasing, molesting animals. First of all, moving on, number 10, animal abandonment. I did add owner or person possession under A. I had originally had just person, so I need to provide that clarification. Then on tethering, I know this was a matter of contention with some of the comments. So the only change that I have made is under B, in which I have included logging chains as an unacceptable method of tethering an animal. I know some of the comments were wanting to ban tethering altogether, and I think the direction from you all was to look at what surrounding counties are doing. And outside of Cumberland and Durham County, those two, so Durham and Cumberland do ban tethering unless the owner or person possession is out there with the animal. But all the other surrounding counties, so Orange, Lee, Chatham, Johnston, Moore, Hoke, Sampson, Wake, they all still allow tethering of an animal. And so based on the fact that surrounding counties still allow it, based on the role, again, the nature of our county and resources and everything, is to still allow tethering. However, again, with these restrictions that are listed on here to ensure the health and safety of the animal. On page 15, I did add a title, so cruelty to animals. So some of this was already in here, but I've subdivided it out to be clear. So you've got cruelty to animals. Under A, you'll see that I deleted the last sentence. However, that's been reincorporated under subsection D there. But I have added under B, again, you'll see it highlighted. It shall be unlawful for any person to keep animals under unsanitary or inhumane conditions, or fail to provide proper food and water at all times, adequate shelter, which has been added, and protection from the weather. So it's just clarifying the language. Under C, I've added that. Again, one of the comments was one that had put in there that not to keep an animal in a hot vehicle. Again, that was already against the law. However, I just went ahead and added the statutory language to our ordinance just to be clear that it is unlawful. So it is unlawful for any person to confine an animal in a motor vehicle under conditions that are likely to cause suffering, injury, or death to the animal due to heat, cold, lack of adequate ventilation, or under other endangering conditions. Again, that's just straight from the state statute. And then again, under D, as I explained, that just provides the exceptions to cruelty for animals. Number 13, again, animal fighting, that has been added per public comment. Again, it's already illegal under state statute to conduct animal fighting, but I've, again, under subsection A, added the statutory language to that, which again states that shall be unlawful for a person to bait, instigate, promote, conduct, provide an animal for, or allow property under a person's ownership or control to be used for any dog fights, cockfights, or other combat between animals. Again, that's coming from state statute. And then B, again, is the exceptions, again, just pulling that from state statute. So that language I've added just comes from state statute. I do want to provide a comment, though, is with the animal fighting. Some of the feedback I received from to add some language in there. from other jurisdictions. Other jurisdictions, including Chatham or Cumberland County, which was a comment I received, they also stated it'd be unlawful to possess materials that are used for animal fighting. I did not add that, one, because it's not in state statute, and two, it is very difficult to charge someone with basically what's paraphernalia. I mean, some of the things in here are materials that can be used for anything. They say materials that can be used for, to build a training pit. Well, that can be wood, wire, whatnot. Can't automatically make having that material illegal. If they have a fighting ring and presumably there's going to be dogs, then an investigation can lead to there's animal fighting to be conducted. But just having material, I don't think it's appropriate. And I mean, another one on here is illegal to have veterinary drugs, suture kits, needles, and syringes, and other veterinary supplies for the administration of veterinary treatment for wounds. Again, not illegal to have those things. So I don't want to charge someone just because they happen to have something that may or may not be for dog fighting. The whole key is you got to look at the big picture. Is when there's investigation, there's going to be animals, there's going to be some kind of proof of it. So I don't want to make it legal just to have the materials. So I did not add that in here. So moving on. Let's see. On page 24, seizure and impoundment of animals. So number 5, 6, and 7 have been added. Now these were already generally in the ordinance, but just making it clear under reasons that you can seize and impound. So number 5 is any animal running at large or which appears to be lost or strayed. Number 6, any dog that has been deemed dangerous or potentially dangerous and is suspected of violating conditions set forth in the dangerous dog section. And then number 7, any animal that is in need of life-saving medical assistance, or if the conditions pose an imminent threat of death or severe injury to the animal. So that is the rare situation in which don't have time to go get a warrant to go on the person's property. The animal is in dire need. We need to go on the property and confiscate the animal. So we have that. That was already practiced, but we've now just added it into the ordinance. And then lastly, the last addition is page 30. Or really a deletion, said application to municipalities. So as I mentioned before, originally I wrote in there that the municipal ordinances shall not be inconsistent with the county. However, based on the feedback I got from the towns, that would be very difficult because they want to ban certain activities that are not in our ordinance. So I've removed that. But as I'll move into the next topic after this with the interlocal agreement, the municipal ordinance will have to be consistent. So we can't have 5 different ordinances. We'll just have to make sure they have all the same one. And then, so that's all the changes. Also want to address just a few other items. So I know one of the things that came up was spay and neutering as a requirement for adoption or redemption. So looking into this, it's absolutely a goal of animal services, and I know of everyone, to spay or neuter pets. However, the issue with making it a requirement for adoption is the cost of the procedure. So we don't have any low-cost options in this county. I was actually given a spreadsheet of local areas around the surrounding counties that provide the service. So it could be, for a dog, it can be anywhere from $135 to $285 to do the spay or neutering, $50 to $110 for cats. And the issue we saw is if we require this with this additional cost, it may actually discourage adoptions, which, we already have an issue filling up our shelter and wanting to adopt animals. We have cleared the shelter events all the time because they fill up. So again, it is a goal that I know Animal Service is striving for, to be able to do all that. But for right now, we can't spay or neuter every animal before it's adopted, and just with the cost of it, I did not add that in. We'll have to hear any feedback on that, but that's why I did not add that in there.
Yeah, I'd like to say something on that. I just don't see how it makes sense if we have a problem with overpopulation or overcrowding in the shelter, for us to let an animal out of there without being spayed or neutered just so we can have 6 of its puppies or kittens come back like in a few months. I think that's just shooting ourselves in the foot. So I really would like to look at options or exactly what we can do if we can grant there's some grants and stuff out there, or even local organizations that maybe we can team up with. But
Right.
I see that just shooting ourselves in the foot right there. That
Great.
makes no sense.
And I agree, and I think animal services and Barry probably agrees. We want to do. We want to be able to do that. We just got to get the funding to be able to do it. So we can make it a requirement ordinance and hope we get the money. We leave it out, and even if we leave it out, still shoot for the goal of we're gonna get the whatever funding that we can to be able to do this before they get adopted out. I mean, that's absolutely a goal of animal services. I just wanted to explain that that's why it wasn't. It's just I was given the spreadsheet of because the alternative if we can't adopt them is a lot more euthanized.
Yeah, but still, I mean, that's on us if we let an animal out of there and then it goes out, and then what? Now we're dealing with even more. It's like we're glutton for punishment.
Right. So I hear you loud and clear. So that's why I left out. However, it's y'all's decision. If you want me to put that in there as a requirement, absolutely, I can do that.
Yeah, I don't know what the number is on that, and I really would want to make sure if you're going to make that a decision, what the expectation based on our numbers of animals that are adopted, what that would be, because it will have an impact on adoptions if we require that. And I think 150, something like that, for cost per spay neuter per animal.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's about $150 per animal. So we need to make sure we're prepared to absorb that cost in some way. Otherwise,
I mean, we're going to be absorbing that cost with an abundance amount of animals that are procreating once we're letting them out of the shelter.
I mean, you're right. It is a cycle that if we don't require that, then we'll have a problem. But I want to make sure that you fully understand what that commitment is.
Gotcha. Well, then we need to look at building a bigger animal shelter then in order to house these other feral animals that are going to be coming in, since we're not going to do that.
I mean, I will say that, because we've always said that about spay and neuter, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We do a lot of programs to try to get spay and neuter. We work with NC State, we work with rescues for that very reason, and we work with low cost where we can find them. So we have things like that going on, and we use some of our budgeted money when we can afford it to do as many as we can. So it's not that we're not going, but you also got to remember we got to keep them by mandatory for 3 days. So now you're adding more time to it. Trying to figure out how to balance what the cost is as we move forward. But that is a goal of ours. There's no doubt about it. We cannot ever get out of this unless we do it. So we realize that.
We'll find it. We'll get a number.
Okay. So want to address that, and then just in general, with all the comments that have been received, again, not ignoring anything, I believe a lot of the requested language that I received is already incorporated into our ordinance, just in a different way. So I know there was concerns that we don't have adequate language in here to be able to enforce. However, again, as I mentioned before, I'm in the charge of having to defend this thing in court, and so I believe that a lot of the language in here that individuals wanted is in here. It's just written in a different way. So I just wanted to point that out, that not that I'm ignoring other sections, just I believe we've adequately covered a lot of items in this ordinance. But otherwise, happy to answer any of our questions or entertain comments or anything else you want to see in here, in addition to the spay and neuter issue.
Any other questions or comments? Do we want to hold off on approving this until we get the spay and neuter part of the ordinance resolved, or do we need to go ahead and?
I mean, I know that that's an item of concern for me. I don't know about the other commissioners, but I mean, we want to postpone this to a later date until we can figure that out. I think it might be beneficial.
What's the pleasure of the board? Try to resolve this before we approve the new ordinance, or?
Well, I certainly would not hurt if we had the information that
Well, and that's
county manager's talking about to have in hand before we
I just talked to Mr. Blevins. We can have, based on our number, we know our numbers of adoptions and animals that are going out, and we can use the numbers and on an average basis and what the funding cost would be. And we can present that to you next week. If you want to include the language, then you could make a motion to amend the ordinance to include the language requiring spayed and neutered before it can be adopted. And then we'll work that number into the budget, either through grants or other funding through the general fund, in order to make sure that that's accomplished. Or we could wait, bring it back as a work session item, the next work session, and then after that, take it for approval. Either way.
I mean, I would imagine housing an animal obviously costs some money, you know, for each one that we have. And if it's going to be $150, let's just say, to spay or neuter an animal, I know what Cumberland County, I mean, they have like a flat rate that they charge. It's like $100 to come in there, you know, adopt an animal, and that includes the spay and neuter. So, I mean, if the county is responsible for the other portion, I think that would save us money in the long run instead of having, you know, overcrowded shelters, you know, stuff like that. We can help out citizens that really want these animals. And I also believe, I mean, kind of like a rehoming fee in a sense, you know, to make sure we don't get them right back. So
I think, don't some of the counties require the person doing the adopting to pay for those spay and neuter fees?
Yeah, that's the concern, is that there won't be adoptions that occur because they have to pay that fee.
You like I said, there's a spreadsheet, and it, again, depends. So the cost varies, but most of it's having to go out of county to do it. But it could add an additional $135 to $285 to the cost of adoption for dogs.
So, think of it this way. Someone comes in, if they have an issue spending $200 in order to adopt a dog, how the heck are they going to support the puppies that this dog has? How are they going to care for this dog? How are they going to provide a food and shelter? You know, I mean,
well, not all dogs that are not spayed and neutered have puppies either.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that's where it's really deciding what is the cost we want to pass on to the individual adopting the animal and the cost that we're going to absorb, and it's finding that.
Because the only thing I'll say that is we have cleared the shelter events, which we end up waiving all the adoption fees just so we can get the animals out of there. So on its current practice, we can't get animals.
I don't think that's the right answer either.
Yeah, because on the current practice, we can't get all the animals adopted that we want on the current fee, on top of adding another $150 to $200 on top of that. So I'm not saying
but
individual responsible.
People probably spayed and neutered their animals, so we probably wouldn't have the issue with overcrowding in the
Let me just add one other thing to consider as you're discussing it, is that if you require spay and neuter for every animal that goes out the door, then that's going to keep us if we cannot get them adopted, then our euthanasia rates will go up, because we're going to get pushed from the other side to bring them in. So it's a vicious cycle, but it needs to be said that if we can't, we hold it. Let's say we say we're going to hold them for 7 days. They're spayed and neutered, or we get rid of them. But on the other side of the fence, you have to spay and neuter, or the euthanasia. So that needs to be, you know, at least spoken of.
I think we should discuss it, wait and discuss it in work session, and then make the final decision. That's just my opinion. I'm on the one vote up here.
I agree.
I agree also. I think in order to give adequate time, I would like to see us put this off until the October 11th work session. Have further discussions. Maybe you can come back with some recommendations on how best to accomplish this.
Sure. And as I research this issue and bring it back for you, is there anything else about the ordinance that I need to look at or have any comments on, just so I can bring back some additional changes, or are we good outside of just researching this issue?
Any other issues with the ordinance as presented so far?
Okay.
Let's try to resolve this issue, and
also we could always make additional changes before then, but I just want to make sure I need to research something else.
I gave you a little extra time by going to October the 11th, by the way.
That's fine. We'll work through it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
All right.
Okay, the interlocal agreements.
Yes. So obviously we'll get around, the animal changes to animal ordinance will be updated at some point, but we can go ahead and move forward with the interlocal agreement. So currently we do provide animal control services for all of our municipalities except for Dunn. Now the issue with the current agreement is, and didn't realize it until the issue was brought forth, is it only allows us to enforce the county ordinance within the municipalities. Now, there is a municipal ordinance that applies. It's just one municipal ordinance, the same thing for all these municipalities. It's, for the most part, adopts our current ordinance, but there are also provisions, special provisions that they have. So they ban certain animals. For example, I know Irwin, they ban roosters, and I think banning horses or whatever it may be. So there's some additional provisions that are added to the municipal ordinance. So obviously, in order for us to be able to enforce the municipal ordinance, our interlocal agreement needs to be updated to state that we can enforce their ordinance. So that's what prompted the review of the interlocal agreement, which then also led to me updating other provisions. So I'll hit some of the highlights on here. The number 2, the animal control ordinance, it just states that we will enforce the municipal ordinance for the towns of Andrew, Coates, Irwin, and Lillington. However, it needs to be, it's clearly stated though that the towns shall not unilaterally adopt any amendments to the municipal ordinance unless all municipalities adopt the same amendment. So this is to help out our animal control officers, so that way they're only enforcing the county ordinance and the special provisions of one municipal ordinance instead of 5 different ones. Under services provided by the county, so this was never stated in the current local agreement, but wanted to establish what we do in practice. So that is, the county will provide animal control services during the hours of 8 a.m. through 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then everything else would be considered after hour calls and emergency services. Number 4 has been added, which is law enforcement assistance. So a town's police department, upon request, shall provide assistance to animal services during the seizure and impoundment of any animal that is in violation of the municipal ordinance or state or federal law. So again, this is especially important on those items in which it's not a violation of the county ordinance, but it's a violation of the municipal ordinance to have a police presence. But again, anytime you're seizing property of an individual can get a little hairy, so having an officer there to assist is important. The term of this agreement begins upon execution and continue until June 30th of 2025, which will be the initial term. Thereafter, it shall automatically renew for consecutive 3-year terms, so we'll just keep rolling with it. And then, which leads into number 8, the compensation and payment. So currently, the towns pay $12,000 per year for the services. I think we decided to keep the current rate at this time. But prior to the renewal period, we will review the compensation and give notice if we decide to increase such compensation and work out those details. Licenses, fees, and penalties. So the current agreement states that all licenses, fees, and penalties, when that goes to the county. However, I believe any civil penalties and fines are associated with enforcement of the specific municipal ordinance. I don't believe legally we can keep those civil fines because it's a violation of their ordinance, not ours. So it just clarifies that those fines will go back to the town, but all other costs associated with county licenses, animal shelter fees, redemption fees, impoundment fees, and so on, those will remain with the county. And then documents and records, anything that we create in the pertaining to the enforcement of the municipal ordinance will be our documents, will be the custodian, and then if local law enforcement enforces any part of the municipal ordinance, will be there. So just clarifying that. And then termination, either party can terminate upon 90 days written notice to the other party without cause. So just in case any party needs to get out of this agreement. But those are the highlights of this. I know Irwin has already approved has already approved this agreement, and all the other towns are currently discussing it, and presumably will approve it either at the end of this month or beginning of next month. If the board is okay with the agreement, we can put them on the consent agenda as we get signed copies from the municipality. So Irwin is ready to go. But if there's any changes, obviously, we'll have to make those.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Okay with it,
Just add it to the consent agendas as they come in. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, sir. All right. Sonny Beth, modified cash deposit schedule for the branch libraries.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners of the Board. What you have before you is a draft of a modification to the current deposit schedule. Currently, we do not have an official deposit schedule because General Statute 159-32 requires units of local government to make daily deposits of funds. So we are required to deposit daily, either deposits made with the finance officer or in our banking institution. But recently, because we consolidated the town libraries, we have had to reevaluate this and look at some of our practices and procedures. So right now, a lot of fines and penalties have been waived or otherwise suspended. So what we have now is the libraries in the municipalities are collecting a very small amount of money. And that creates an issue with an individual from the main library going to each municipality daily to collect those funds and bring them back to us. So the statute allows you as the board to prepare a resolution and make a finding that we can hold funds on hand up to a certain amount. The statute authorizes you to allow us to hold up to $500. I am not recommending that. At the time, I would like to prepare for you to approve a resolution to allow the libraries to hold up to $250 in fines, whatever they collect, but they have to deposit weekly. That will give us time to look over that, look at how those libraries do business, because I know now with COVID, people are coming back to the libraries. And that will give us sufficient time, but at a minimum, they will be required to deposit weekly. So there will be someone collecting those funds weekly. In addition, there is a very minimal amount of money that they're allowed to keep daily in their drawers. So any in excess of that amount that's been determined by the director, Angela McCauley, and myself, that will be secured in a place. So it's not like they will be having that kind of money at those desks. So any questions? And I can say that this is the first resolution in my 27 years that we've ever had to do this. So.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
just make sure I heard correctly or am reading this. So the max would be $100.
$250.
This says
Well,
100.
500 is the resolution. I mean, is what the statute requires. And then the last paragraph is where you say, okay, we recognize that 500 is the max, but we are setting our limit at 250. That's in that last paragraph.
Unless I can't read the
I don't see
resolution.
250.
The resolution says $100.
It does.
Resolution says 100.
Okay, mine says 250.
The last paragraph.
Wrong draft.
Yeah, mine says 250.
Yeah.
Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Commissioners of Harnett County
The one in the
that the
packet
library
says
branch locations are not required to make daily deposits so long as no branch has on hand collected cash exceeding $100.
Okay. Well, I'm fine with 100.
I mean, I'm fine with 250. Let's just,
We went back and forth, to
let's
be
just
honest
make
with
the
you.
change and change this from 100 to 250.
Well, and we did go back and forth because with the municipalities, we're not sure what kind of activity with the numbers coming back, because I know Angela has repeatedly discussed that those numbers, are going up. So 250 would be better, if you're okay with it.
Well, I'll be honest,
And I will update it for the correct year.
I would feel better with 100. I just don't think we need to be leaving a lot of cash in a place that security-wise is probably not top of the line. You know, from what I'm seeing for the purposes that they would be collecting money, since we're not collecting fines anymore, you know, it could take a long time for us to get to 250. But the weekly thing, I like that as well,
Yes.
so that will help.
Yes.
But that's just my 2 cents.
Why could the individual municipalities not make their own deposits into our account? I don't know what bank we use, but.
First Bank, so there,
Okay, for example, in Andrew, there's a First Bank. Why can't they go up and make a deposit at First Bank in Andrew, and that would put it in Harnett County's account at First Bank?
and as the finance officer, I have that authority to direct that. What we were looking at is that depending on the size of the deposit, so, and what the charges are, because now with banks, the way their fee structures are scheduled, you know, we don't earn interest, but they also charge us. So they could theoretically charge me, let's say, $3 for a deposit of 50 cents if it's
If they start
daily.
charging us for a deposit, we need to start looking for another bank.
That's every bank. And also keep in mind, a lot of banks are closing up, so I wouldn't necessarily have a branch of First Bank in, like the one in we've got one in Lillington. I'm sorry, not First Bank, it's PNC. I misspoke. There's a PNC. The PNC here closed up, so we do not have a physical presence. So,
PNC isn't done.
ma'am.
PNC isn't done.
Yes, ma'am. There is one in Dunn, so we could require them to deposit in Dunn and any other branch. If there's a bank in these municipalities, I could go and open up an account for them to deposit into. That's something we can also look at.
It was just it saves us having to send an employee around, you know.
If you would like, we could actually pull this. Angela and I could look at possibly opening up, or I could open up accounts, get some data on that, and come back with some other solutions if you prefer.
If I could just interject.
Okay.
Excuse me, just happened to come in on the end of the conversation. It would not be our intention to send specifically someone out just to collect the deposit. We have a courier that goes out twice weekly, and we want to coordinate that time so that we're not making a special trip and wasting that gas money to pick up $2 or $3 or, you know, whatever amount. So we would coordinate for time purposes and for saving gas for when that courier goes out. And she would, while she's picking up books from the other branches, she would also collect money. I mean, we can still do it any way you want, but we're not making a special trip just to collect money.
It's the pleasure of the board.
Least invasive, and they got that out already. I would keep it at $100 and let them ride weekly how they have been doing.
Well,
So leave it at $100 and let the library do the collection and say.
Good with that.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we'll move this to the consent agenda.
All right, thank you.
All right, the next item is appointments to serve on boards, committees. We have different applications for the Board of Adjustment. There's 2 applications for District 4, and as District 4 Commissioner, I would like to appoint Mr. William Dan Andrews. I think Commissioner Matthews says he does not know, and I do not know Mr. Summers, so we want to pull that and do a little more investigation on that one.
And I will add that I have been approached and evidently he's not applied, but I've been approached by another individual about interest in that position, so I need to follow up on that.
Can I add something to
Yes,
this?
ma'am.
That is what I was trying to relate to the board in the last meeting about how we make these appointments. Now, in the past, it used to be when these positions become available, all the commissioners, if they were in my district, in your district, or whatever, we will be made aware of these vacancies that we need to fill. But as time has passed on, it seems that we are being brought names of people that can serve on that I don't know where these names come up from, but it certainly eliminates our ability to reach out to constituents in our district that may want to serve in these positions. And I have been approached by some of my constituents saying, how do I serve on a board? They have no chance in serving on a board if these names are submitted by whoever, the county manager, whoever, for us to vote on. I still think that those names should come. Is those names? No. Let me back up. When these positions come available for our district, I think the commissioners should be made known about these positions. Because I personally feel it's unfair to our constituents not to give them the chance to serve on these boards. I just select the names that are submitted to us. We can select these names that are submitted to us if we don't have members of our district or constituents in our district that we know that want to be a part of these commission boards available. I think it's being I think it's doing a disservice to our constituents in our district. That's what I'm saying.
I know both of these gentlemen
Well,
in
I
District 4.
understand that.
And that's why I'm asking for that we approve on the consent agenda Monday, Mr. William Dan Andrews.
I mean, I'm not saying not to do
No, I
that.
agree, and I agree with what you're saying.
I'm saying, I don't know these people here, that names have been submitted to me.
Chairman?
For District 1, but I do know people in my district, constituents have said to me, I would love to serve on a board for District 1.
Chairman?
So, yes, sir.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
We heard very clear from you last time your desire to do that, and Melissa and Jamie have met and have a plan that they will be putting in place related to notifying the board. The issue as to why you see names that you don't know is anyone from the public can apply to serve on a board. And so they do that through our portal and make those applications. So even though you may not know them. So if you know somebody that's interested in serving on the board, it's out there for them to apply. We're also going to be looking at and when these are going to come up for renewal, to notify you that the renewals are coming for these individuals. And so Melissa and Jamie have a plan in place that will handle that. So going forward, you will see the names, you'll see the individuals that are interested in serving the positions. If you have not had a time, and they'll be notifying you when those are coming, and anytime a person applies, you'll be getting a notification prior to it actually appearing on this list. The issue is that it needs to be presented on this list so that it's public that these individuals have applied. Now, just like Chairman Matthews stated, he has not had an opportunity to do research on whether this is an individual. We're simply notifying you that these individuals are interested in the position, not recommending that they be selected for the position. It's simply a notification. So we're trying to ramp that up, and they've got a good plan that I think will be better going forward as to the notifications. And I think that change in personnel that occurred in the office, things were done differently in the past, and so we're trying to make it better for you. We'll take as we go forward, any information you have as to the process, whether it's working or not working going forward. We sure appreciate that feedback. But I think we've got a good plan going forward, and it may not appear that on this sheet, but there is a better plan going forward as to how we're handling this.
I know for my district in the Board of Adjustment, that's the way it happened, according to the new plan. And the Harnett County Planning Board, which I haven't addressed yet, same thing. When this application came in, this person is in my district and it was forwarded to me, which is the way we had talked about it should be. And that being said, I would like to ask the board if they would, if the consensus of the board would be to add Mr. Tart to the planning board.
I have a problem. And I know this lady, was it a teacher? Miss Maida has been on this list for District 1 for at least 2 months. And I have decided that I would ask the board to approve her.
Okay.
Because I don't think it would be fair to the citizen not to approve her, because her name had been submitted to me before we had this discussion. And now I'm ready to move forward with a new way of selecting constituents in my district as well as you all's district. Because, Kimberly, that is the way it used to be, is that not?
Mm-hmm.
You've been here for a while. So I'm moving forward with her.
Okay.
And I asked the board to go ahead on, but for now, I would like to know. And I would like to know that these positions are coming available for my District 1. So there may be somebody in my district that has approached me personally that want to serve on my boards, our board, the county boards. And I think it's fair to our constituents for all districts.
Okay, so what we're going to add to the consent agenda is William Dan Andrews for Board of Adjustment, District 4, Scott Tart, Planning Board Member at Large, and Letitia Maynor, District 1, Home and Community Care Block Grant Committee. Are there any other nominations that because we're going to put this on the consent agenda and vote on it. Are there any other recommendations? Commissioner Johnson, you've got one.
Yeah, I've got one for Home and Community Care Block Grant Committee. And I don't know this person, but I don't feel good about recommending them because I have no idea who they are.
Okay. Well, do we want to accept her resignation?
I don't have a problem with accepting that.
We will accept her resignation and leave that position open. If that's the pleasure of the board. All right. Takes care of that item. Unless there's something further with the other commissioners. If not, Mr. Trout, the county manager's report.
Thank you, Chair. The only item I have is that a couple of months ago, we had a citizen that came before us that mentioned about a Facebook page that had some various issues with white supremacy pictures and other types of language on that website. Ashley Bauer notified Facebook Meta about the concerns that we have that they were impersonating a county page. We eventually heard back from Facebook stating that at this point they were not going to remove the page. It states in the headline that it is a fan page, not an official page. So at this point, they will not do as we requested to remove the page. We do not support the statements and so forth that are on that page, and we will continue to monitor. And if they ever remove their notification regarding a fan page, we will take action. But we have notified them, and we wish they would have taken action, but they did not. So I want to apologize that it is out there, but we've done everything that we can to have it removed.
Do we know who created this page? Do we know who created the page?
No, Meta, Facebook will not provide us that information. They do not expose who administrator or of the Facebook page is, so we don't have any idea as to who created it.
But I certainly appreciate you announcing it to the public, because the public needs to be aware that this is something that we have no control over. It's something that we are interested in having removed, because I don't need that feedback from our constituents in our district. So I appreciate you bringing notice to that to the public.
You're welcome.
One last item, please, the board, on the 9/19 agenda, there's a request from the Gun Emergency Services purchasing a new truck or a new used truck. Used new truck, I don't know, whichever, but anyway, it's no, there's no county funds required. I'd like to, if the board's in agreement, add this to the consent agenda to approve them. I guess they got the funding, Larry?
The chief has, right now they're looking at and hopefully make a decision this week whether they're going to finance that or pay for it in cash.
Okay. So,
That's what probably.
but either way, it doesn't affect any county funds. So if everybody's in agreement, we'll put that on the consent agenda and approve it Monday night.
Yes.
All right. You will add that to the consent agenda.
Will do.
That's all I have. If anyone else have anything before us today? We do not have a need for a closed session, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? We are adjourned.